On the morning of February 26, 1995, the employees of Barings Bank arrived at work and discovered that their employer no longer existed. Not bankrupt, not struggling, gone. In a single weekend, a bank that had survived Napoleon, the Great Depression, 2 world wars, and over 2 centuries of financial chaos had been wiped out entirely. The cause was one man, one secret account, and one earthquake 5,000 miles away from London. This is the story of how the entire financial world learned a lesson it keeps forgetting. To understand why Barings' collapse shocked the world, you have to understand what Barings was. Founded in 1762 by Francis Baring in London, Barings was not simply a bank, it was an institution. When the United States needed financing for the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, one of the largest land transactions in history, they didn't go to an American bank. They went to Barings. When Argentina needed capital to build railroads in the 1880s, they went to Barings. When the British royal family needed private banking services, they went to Barings. The Duc de Richelieu, the French Prime Minister, once said there were 6 great powers in Europe: England, France, Prussia, Austria, Russia, and Barings Bank. By 1994, Barings had 4,000 employees and over £5 billion in assets. It had survived the Napoleonic Wars. It had survived the Panic of 1890. It had survived the 1929 crash and both world wars. It would not survive Nick Leeson. Nick Leeson was born in 1967 in Watford, a working-class town north of London. He left school at 18, got a job as a clerk at Coutts Bank, then moved to Morgan Stanley, then to Barings in 1989. He was good at the administrative side, settlements, back office, the paperwork that makes trading possible. And in 1992, Barings sent him to Singapore to manage the trading operation there. This was the first mistake. Nick was sent to Singapore to both manage the back office and to trade. The person who records the trades was also the person making them. In any properly functioning financial institution, these are kept completely separate. The trader cannot touch the records of their own trades, because if they can hide things. Barings sent Nick to Singapore to do both. At first, he excelled. By 1993, his operation was generating £10 million in profits, 10% of the bank's total annual profit. In London, the senior partners loved Nick Leeson. He was their star. What they didn't know was that he had already started hiding the losses. It started with £20,000. In July 1992, one of Nick's junior traders made a simple error. She sold options she wasn't authorized to sell, creating a small loss. Nick needed somewhere to park the loss until he could sort it out without drawing attention. Every trading operation has an error account, a temporary holding space for mistakes. But Nick created a separate, secret account, account 88888. In Chinese culture, 8 is the luckiest number. Nick would later say he named it as a kind of dark joke. The original loss was covered quickly. He could have closed the account. He didn't. Instead, he started using account 88888 to hide his own trading losses whenever his bets went wrong. His reported results looked spectacular. His real results were a slow-motion disaster. By the end of 1993, the secret account held £23 million in hidden losses. By the end of 1994, it held £208 million. Still nobody in London checked. This is the part of the story that has haunted financial regulators for 30 years. Because Nick Leeson's deception was not sophisticated, it was not technically brilliant. Any competent audit would have found the secret account in an afternoon. But nobody audited it. Why not? Several reasons converged into a perfect storm of institutional blindness. First, Nick was producing extraordinary profits on paper. When your star trader is generating 10% of total bank profits, you don't probe too hard. The incentive to look is overwhelmed by the incentive to keep receiving. Second, Singapore was far away. London management visited occasionally, but didn't truly understand derivatives trading. Nick could, and did, baffle them with complexity. Third, because Nick controlled both trading and settlement, any discrepancy between what he reported and what actually happened in his accounts was never independently verified. There were warning signs. The Singapore International Monetary Exchange sent Barings 2 letters in 1994 raising concerns about capital. London's internal auditors visited Singapore in 1994 and specifically noted that Nick had too much control. Their recommendation? Separate his roles. Management acknowledged the recommendation and did nothing. By January 1995, the secret account held £512 million in hidden losses. Nick was trapped. To cover his positions, he needed markets to move in his favor. Instead, he was about to get hit by an earthquake. On January 17, 1995, a 6.9 magnitude earthquake struck Kobe, Japan. Over 6,000 people died. Entire neighborhoods collapsed. The markets responded immediately. The Nikkei, Japan's main stock index, dropped sharply as investors priced in the economic damage. For Nick Leeson, this was catastrophic. He had been betting heavily that the Nikkei would rise. The earthquake had just pushed it in the opposite direction. Most traders in this position would cut their losses, accept the pain, close the position. Nick doubled down. In the weeks following the earthquake, he dramatically increased his bets, buying more Japanese futures contracts in an attempt to recoup his losses before anyone noticed. This was not trading. This was desperation. By mid-February, Nick had accumulated positions in Japanese futures contracts with a total face value of £7 billion. He controlled roughly 40% of all open futures contracts on the Singapore exchange. One trader, from one small office, was now carrying a position larger than most banks' entire derivatives books. The Nikkei kept falling. On February 23, 1995, Nick Leeson left his office in Singapore for the last time. He wrote a note on his desk. It said, "I'm sorry." Then he got on a plane to Malaysia. When Barings management in London finally accessed the secret account on February 24th, they found losses of £827 million, roughly $1.4 billion. This exceeded the bank's entire capital reserves. Barings Bank was insolvent. The Bank of England convened emergency meetings over the weekend. They called every major bank in the city, looking for a buyer who would assume Barings' liabilities. One by one, the calls went the same way. The losses were too large, the exposure too uncertain. On February 26th, Barings Bank was declared insolvent. A Dutch financial services company bought the entire institution for the symbolic price of £1 and assumed the debts. 233 years of history, sold for £1. Nick Leeson fled to Malaysia, then Germany. He was arrested at Frankfurt Airport and extradited to Singapore, where he pleaded guilty to fraud and was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. He served 4. The 1,200 Barings employees lost their jobs. Many lost portions of their pensions. The chairman lost a family institution that had existed for longer than the United States. Here is what makes the Barings collapse more than a story about one rogue trader. Nick Leeson didn't break the system. He found a gap in it, a gap that everyone around him had the ability and responsibility to close. The warning signs were there. The auditors flagged the problem. The Singapore exchange sent letters. The structural weakness was known. It was ignored because the numbers looked good. This is what financial historians call the great recurring sin of banking. Institutions that reward performance without understanding it. When someone is producing results you can't explain, the correct response is to ask harder questions. The human response, the institutional response, is to stop asking questions and keep cashing the checks. Barings was not destroyed by a clever criminal. It was destroyed by motivated blindness, by a culture that decided the profits mattered more than the process. That culture didn't die with Barings. It was present at Enron in 2001. It was present in every major bank during the 2008 mortgage crisis. It's present somewhere right now. The lesson of Nick Leeson isn't about fraud. It's about what happens when institutions stop asking how. If you found this useful, subscribe to Masters of Value. Every week, we trace the hidden logic of how money, power, and human psychology combine to shape the world you live in.